If you had to choose between honor and love, which would you choose? I've lived long enough to know that the answer ain't as easy as it sounds. Out here, under the wide, merciless sky of the frontier, the world doesn't care much for your feelings. It cares for the land, for bloodlines, for names carved into headstones and cattle brands. Love? Love gets buried right alongside the people who dared to feel it. Her name was Evelyn Cade, Sheriff Cade's daughter. But we just called her Eve, like the first woman, like trouble wrapped in light. She wasn't soft like the preacher's girls, and she sure as hell wasn't quiet. She was the kind of girl who climbed onto rooftops during lightning storms and laughed when the wind tangled her hair. Folks in town whispered about how she'd been born during a dust storm, her mother screaming through contractions while the wind ripped the shutters off the windows. They said Eve came into the world with dirt in her lungs and thunder in her bones. She had the eyes of someone who saw more than she let on. Pale green, like grass trying to survive in drought. Most girls her age were married off by 17, working the fields or birthing babies in clapboard shacks. But not Eve. Sheriff Cade had only one child, and he guarded her like a man guards a safe full of gold. Polite smiles in public, a loaded rifle by the door at night. But you can't cage the wind, not out here. The year was 1882, dry as old bone. Our town, Larkspur, sat between nothing and nowhere. One church, one saloon, one jail. The sky stretched forever, painted in fire, each dusk, like God was showing off before leaving the world in darkness. I worked with my brother on a cattle drive north of Larkspur, breaking wild mustangs and living off stale biscuits and black coffee that tasted like ash. We were nobodies, hired hands, the kind of men folks nod to but never invite to dinner, especially not by the sheriff. The first time I saw her, really saw her, was at a funeral. Some poor boy, kicked in the head by a horse. Small town, big grief. She stood behind her father, veil drawn, hands trembling, and yet, even in mourning black, she glowed. Not with prettiness, no, she was beyond that. She looked like something the desert made when it got tired of being ugly. I didn't expect her to look back, but she did. Just a glance, nothing more. But some glances stay in your bones. Weeks passed. The summer heat baked the earth, and the cows moaned at night like ghosts. I kept to myself. Tried not to let her haunt me. I told myself I was being foolish, dreaming above my station. But she kept appearing, at the well, at the general store, even at the creek near the edge of town where she liked to sketch in a leather notebook. Always alone, always just out of reach. One day, I found a horseshoe lying where she'd been sitting. It was broken, cracked right down the center. I should have taken that as a sign. I didn't speak to her until the night of the fire. Old Man Perkins' barn had gone up in flames. No one knew if it was lightning or lantern oil spilled by drunks. The town ran to help, and so did I. Amid the chaos, I saw her standing barefoot in the dirt, holding a bucket bigger than her arms could carry. Her face was streaked with soot, and her dress torn at the hem, but she looked fierce, alive. She handed me the bucket without a word. We didn't talk until it was over, until the embers glowed and the townsfolk drifted back to their homes. She was sitting on a rock, wiping ash from her arms. I offered her my canteen. She took it. "You've got kind eyes," she said. I froze. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't let my father see us talkin'. He don't take kindly to strangers." I should have walked away, said thank you, and left it at that. "But love don't follow reason." "Then let's not talk where he can see," I said. She blinked, and then she laughed. Not a pretty giggle, A wild, shaking laugh, like someone who hadn't heard a real joke in years. That was the beginning. What followed wasn't planned, wasn't proper. We met in secret, behind the church, near the creek, beneath the cottonwoods, where the wind always whispered like it knew our names. We didn't touch, not at first, just talked. She asked about horses, about places I'd seen, about stars and songs and what kind of tree I'd be if I could be one. I told her I'd be a sycamore, tall, stubborn, hard to kill. She said she'd be a willow, always bending, never breaking. But we both knew you can bend, and one day you still snap. I didn't know how deep it was getting until I started dreaming of her voice, until I rode 5 miles out of my way just to see her scarf caught in a branch, until my hands shook every time I passed the sheriff's house. We never kissed, not yet, but I think our souls did. In those silences between words, in the long looks under the painted sky, when the desert sun bled red into the earth and everything felt suspended, like the world was holding its breath. But the world doesn't hold still forever, and neither does a father with a badge. If your heart told you to stay, but your name would be dirt for doing it, would you still stay? There comes a moment on the frontier when silence speaks louder than a bullet. You feel it in the way the wind changes, in how the birds stop singing, in the way the dust rises a little too fast from horse hooves you didn't expect to hear. I remember that day like it had burned itself into the back of my eyes. It was just after dawn. The sky was soft pink and bruised violet, the kind of sky that makes you believe in things you shouldn't. I was riding back from checking fence lines. A quiet ride until I crested the south ridge and saw him. A man on a paint horse, motionless as a ghost carved from stone, wrapped in a faded serape, long black braid down his back. He wasn't from town, not from any place I knew. His horse was lean, his face leaner. He looked like someone who'd been hunted and had learned to move like the wind, fast when needed, quiet always. Our eyes met across the prairie, and for a second neither of us moved. I nodded. He didn't nod back. Then he turned and vanished behind the mesa rocks like he'd never been there. Back in town, rumors moved faster than truth. The storekeep said a stranger had come down from the hills asking about old cattle trails. The blacksmith claimed he saw him sleeping with one eye open beside a campfire that never smoked. Some said he was Apache. Others said outlaw. One drunk insisted he was death himself, come for someone in Larkspur. But Evelyn had seen him too. I knew the minute I saw her eyes. Not fear, not curiosity. Recognition. We were meeting behind the church that night, same as always, under that crooked pine tree that leaned like it was eavesdropping. She came wearing her brother's coat, boots covered in dust, curls half tucked under a bonnet, like she'd been somewhere she shouldn't have. She didn't speak for a long time, just stared up at the stars. "You saw him too," I finally said. She flinched just slightly, then nodded. "His name's Mateo. Friend of yours." She gave a hollow laugh. "Once, a long time ago." There was something tight in her throat when she said it, a memory she hadn't let breathe in years. I didn't push. Out here, some ghosts get angry when you try to name them. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. "He used to live out there, beyond the river. When I was little, we'd trade things, buttons for beads, stories for songs. Then one day, his family was gone. Army said they relocated, but Papa never talked about it. I figured they died." The silence that followed pressed heavy on both of us. "What does he want now?" I asked. She didn't answer, just looked down at her hands. Her fingers were shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of the way she said his name. Mateo. Like it hurt her to say it. Like it meant something more than history. And maybe it did. Love has many faces. Some you bury. Some you wear like scars. A few days later, I saw Mateo again, this time at the edge of the creek. He was kneeling in the water, washing blood from his hands. I drew my rifle before I could stop myself. He didn't flinch, didn't even turn around, just said, "If you were going to shoot, you would have already." I lowered the barrel, slow. My voice was rough. "You're making people nervous. I ain't here for them." "Then who?" He stood tall and calm. "Evelyn." My stomach turned cold. "She's spoken for," I said, though I had no right to say it. Not out loud, not to him. "She's not a thing to be spoken for," he replied. I should have punched him, should have thrown him in front of the sheriff myself. But the way he said it, it wasn't arrogant. It wasn't cruel. It was broken. "She saved my life once," he said, looking down into the water like it held the past. "When I was 10, I stepped on a rattler. She cut the bite open herself, made me drink whiskey from her daddy's flask. Said if I died, she'd never forgive me." His eyes met mine. I came back to say thank you, that's all. But I didn't believe him, and I knew Evelyn didn't either. That evening, she didn't show. First time in weeks. I waited. I waited so long. The coyotes stopped howling, and the moon began to sink. Something had changed. A page had turned in a book I wasn't allowed to read. When I finally saw her again, it was in the chapel. She was sitting in the back row, face blotched, eyes puffy. She looked like a girl who had cried herself dry. She saw me, didn't smile. "I kissed him," she whispered. "The world didn't end, but it sure as hell shifted. And suddenly, everything I thought I understood about love, about honor, felt like dust slipping through my fingers. So I ask again, if you had to choose between honor and love, between a heart that bleeds and a name that stands tall, what would you do?" Because I stood there in that chapel, heart pounding like a war drum, and all I could think was, I'd give up my name, my work, my life, but I don't know if she'd do the same for me. If love comes to you in pieces, some yours, some never meant to be, do you take what you can or leave it all behind? The days that followed were a kind of quiet I wouldn't wish on a dying man. The kind where the world keeps turning, but inside you something stopped. The sun still rose, the wind still stirred the cottonwoods, but I moved through it all like I was underwater, heavy, slow, listening for her voice in every gust of wind that rattled the windows of the bunkhouse. I didn't go to the creek, didn't go into town unless I had to. When I did, folks were already talking about Evelyn, about the stranger, about how the sheriff had been seen cleaning his shotgun before dawn. You didn't need a preacher to tell you what kind of sermon was coming. I stayed away until I couldn't any more. Then one night, right before sundown, I saddled my horse and rode out toward the old fire tower on Ridge Bluff. She used to talk about it like it was a place of secrets. Said you could see the whole world from up there if the wind was right. She was there. I knew she would be. Her dress fluttered like smoke in the wind. Her hair was down, loose, wild, like it always wanted to be. She didn't look at me when I arrived, just kept staring out at the vast nothing, the Badlands painted in strokes of gold and red, the sky bleeding into night like a wound slowly healing. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, barely above a whisper. I dismounted, walked up beside her. "Then why did you?" She swallowed. "Because I didn't know I still loved him. Not till I saw him." Her words didn't sting, they carved. "And now?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers were twisting a dry piece of prairie grass, the way she did when she was nervous. Finally, she looked at me, eyes filled with that same storm that had always lived behind them. "Now I love two men. One I buried in memory. One I see in dreams." I laughed, bitter. "And where does that leave me?" She didn't flinch. "With my heart." "Half of it," I said. "Maybe," she whispered. "But maybe it's the half that's still learning how to love right." We sat in silence. The wind howled across the bluff, and for a moment I imagined what it would be like if none of this mattered, if there was no sheriff, no town, no fences, just her and me, free as the hawks that flew above us. But the West doesn't trade in dreams. It trades in scars, in choices, in what you're willing to lose to keep hold of what matters. She turned to me then, full, eyes shining. "I can't be both things, you know. I can't be the sheriff's daughter and someone's secret." "Then stop hiding," I said, almost daring her. "Come with me. Ride east. Start over." Her lip trembled. "And let him chase us?" "You know he will." "Let him. You'd give up your work, your land?" "I'd give up my name." She stared at me for a long time, and then she kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, full of the kind of ache only people who've lived with locked-up love can understand. Her hands gripped my collar like she was falling, and I caught her like I'd been waiting my whole life to do it. But the sky doesn't stay painted in fire forever. When we pulled apart, we both heard it. The gallop of hooves, distant but closing fast. We didn't need to ask who it was. Sheriff Cade rode like a man chasing vengeance, not justice. He stopped 10 paces from us, shotgun across his lap, mustache twitching with rage. His eyes burned straight through me. "Get away from my daughter," he said. No shout, just cold steel. Evelyn stepped in front of me. "You shoot him," she said. "You'll have to shoot me first." I could see it then. That heartbreak in a father's eyes when he realizes he's no longer the center of his child's world. It's a look that kills slower than any bullet. He didn't lower the gun. "Eve," I said gently, "don't." She didn't move. I'm not afraid of him anymore. But I was, not for myself, for her. I stepped beside her, slowly. "Sheriff," I said, "if you're gonna pull that trigger, do it now. But you should know, if I fall, she's not going with you. Not in her soul." His jaw clenched, his finger twitched on the trigger, and then he spat in the dirt, lowered the barrel. "You're not worth the grave I'd have to dig," he muttered. "But if I ever see you near her again, I'll bury you without one." He turned his horse and rode off, not looking back. Evelyn's knees buckled. I caught her before she fell. We didn't speak, not that night, but later, as we lay under the stars, side by side on the hard ground with only a blanket and each other. She asked, "What now?" I didn't have an answer, because when love's forbidden, even survival feels like betrayal. And yet, I didn't let go. "So tell me, what would you have done? Would you ride into the storm for love? Or would you stay behind, where your name still means something, and let her ride alone? If loving someone meant losing everything you'd ever known, your work, your family, your name, would you still hold their hand? Or let go before the fire swallowed you both?" It wasn't the kind of storm you see in the sky that came for us. No thunder, no rain, just people, whispers, eyes, doors that used to open now stayed shut. The town turned colder than any winter wind ever did, and I I kept waking in the middle of the night with my hand reaching out for someone who wasn't there. Evelyn didn't come back to town for 3 days after that night. She stayed with her aunt on the far side of the mesa. Folks assumed it was because of the sheriff's wrath. But the truth was, she was deciding whether to become someone the town wouldn't recognize. And me, I was deciding whether I had the spine to let her. Because loving Evelyn Cade meant I'd never work another honest day in Larkspur. Meant the name I'd spent years trying to make clean would get dragged back through the mud. Meant I'd be called a thief, a fool, a no-good saddle tramp who put his hands where they didn't belong. And maybe all that would have been true. But none of it made me stop loving her. I saw Mateo once during that time. He rode in just after dusk, calm as ever, and tied his horse at the edge of the river. I walked out to meet him, both of us standing like 2 sentries from different wars. "She's not yours anymore," I said. He looked at me, long and sad. "She was never mine to keep. You kissed her." She let me. There was no hate in his voice. Just that kind of knowing you see in old men who've watched too many dreams die. Then he said something I didn't expect. "She chooses you, but she carries me in her memory. Be kind to the part of her I left there." And then he rode off. That's the thing about some men. They don't fight with fists. They fight with grace. And somehow it hurts more. The next morning, Evelyn showed up at my door. Hair pinned, boots dusty, eyes steady. "I told him," she said. My heart stopped. "Your father?" She nodded. "What did he say?" She looked down. "He said if I walk away from his house, I don't come back. Not even to bury him." And there it was, the price of love. She'd packed a satchel. Said she had money enough to get us east. There were places, she'd heard, where folks didn't care about your last name or who your daddy was. Places where the sky wasn't stained with expectation. Places where maybe we could be 2 people in peace, instead of 2 names in a scandal. I should have said yes. I should have thrown that satchel on my saddle and rode out of that cursed town with her right then. But I didn't, because I was a coward in the way good men sometimes are. Afraid of what I'd lose more than hopeful for what I'd gain. "I can't leave now," I told her, voice cracking. "I still owe my brother 2 weeks' ride on the cattle drive. If I run now, I'll lose everything I've built." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "You think I haven't lost everything?" "I know you have," I whispered. "That's why I want to leave clean, with nothing hanging over us. No shame, no guilt." She didn't say anything, just turned, walked out. That night, the wind howled like something dying. And maybe it was. Maybe it was us. 3 days passed, no word. Then I heard a knock, but it wasn't Evelyn. It was the sheriff. His eyes were bloodshot, his face hollow, like something had drained the fury out of him and left a man I didn't recognize. "Where is she?" he asked. "I don't know." "You're lying." "Not this time." He stared at me, hard. Then he pulled something from his coat. It was a letter, scrawled in Evelyn's handwriting. "If I stay, I lose myself. If I leave, I lose you. I'm sorry, I couldn't be both yours and theirs. Tell him I waited until the last star faded." That was all it said. She was gone. Nobody saw her leave. No horse tracks, no farewells. Just a saddle missing from the stable, and a note that felt like the end of a life we hadn't finished living. The sheriff left without another word. I never saw him again after that. Some say he resigned. Others say he rode south and never stopped. As for me, I did my last ride, collected my last wages, packed what little I had and stared at the road until my vision blurred. I thought maybe I'd follow her, find the tracks, trace her scent on the wind. But the truth is, I didn't even know which way she went. Love has a way of turning the strongest hearts to ash, of testing your pride until there's nothing left but a name you don't care to say out loud. So I ask you again, if you had to choose between the one you love and the world that raised you, fed you, gave you a place to belong, would you ride off into the unknown, or would you stay, hoping they'll return? If you spend your whole life doing the right thing, but it costs you the one person who ever made your heart feel alive, did you really live right? I ask myself that every morning the sun breaks over this prairie. I still live out here on a patch of dry land that gives little and remembers everything. The wind's meaner now, colder, or maybe I just notice it more. Maybe it cuts deeper, because there's no one left to warm me when it blows. It's been 12 years since Evelyn Cade vanished into the horizon. 12 winters, 12 springs, and not one day has passed that I haven't thought of her riding away under that painted sky. Folks stopped asking after a while. People forget what makes them uncomfortable, especially when it comes to love that didn't follow the rules. But I never forgot. After she left, I did the honorable thing, stayed, paid my debts, finished my work. I helped bury the men who'd once mocked me, carried the coffins of ranchers who said I'd never amount to more than a pair of calloused hands. I became the man everyone trusted, but no one really knew, because the truth of me had already ridden off with her. I did try to find her once, year after she left, when the ache got too loud to ignore. I sold my horse, bought a faster one, and followed every rumor that smelled of hope. Missouri, Arkansas, Santa Fe. I chased shadows and names that weren't hers. A woman singing in a traveling troupe who looked like Evelyn from a distance. A teacher with green eyes who taught Spanish to orphans in El Paso. I even rode to a small town where they said a white woman married a Comanche man and ran a trading post with 2 kids and a pet fox. But none of them were her. And then, one day, I found myself sitting in a saloon, drunk on regret, staring at a cracked mirror and realizing I wasn't chasing her anymore. I was chasing the ghost of who I used to be when I stood beside her. So I came home, if you can call this place home. The sheriff's old house stands empty now. Weeds climbing up the porch posts. Roof caved in on the left side. They say he died in San Marcos, alone in a boarding house, with no one to claim the body. I sometimes wonder if he ever forgave her, or me. But forgiveness don't mean much when the dirt's already covering your chest. Sometimes I sit on the ridge and watch the sun bleed across the sky just like it did the night she kissed me. The same colors. That deep violet edge like bruised silk. That fire-orange glow that makes you believe for a second that something holy lives in the sky. I sit there and wonder if she still remembers me. And then, one day, something changed. It was early fall, the kind of day when the wind carries the smell of wood smoke and old apples. I was out by the fence line, mending a post split from last week's lightning, and I saw a rider, far off, moving slow, too slow for a traveler passing through. As they got closer, my heart did something I thought it had forgotten how to do. It wasn't her. But it was something. A boy. Couldn't have been older than 11. Dark skin, green eyes, braids, dust on his clothes, and something wild in his stare. "You lost?" I asked, cautious. He shook his head. "You got a name, son?" He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. "He's not lost. He's mine, and he's yours. His name is Elijah. Teach him to ride like you did. Let him ask about me when he's ready. I will always love you. E. I read it 5 times before I could breathe. And then I looked at the boy. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He looked exactly like her, and exactly like me. I built a second bed that night. Showed him how to saddle a horse, how to listen to the coyotes, how to light a fire with nothing but flint and anger. He didn't ask about her for 2 weeks. Then one night, while we sat by the fire, he said, "Did she really climb on roofs during lightning storms?" I laughed. "She did. She ever ride bareback into the canyon?" "More than once." He looked at me, wide-eyed. "She's not scared of anything, is she?" I looked into the fire, the warmth dancing in my eyes. "She's scared of forgetting. That's why she left you with me." He nodded, then leaned against me, and in that moment I realized something I never expected. Maybe I hadn't lost her after all. Maybe love doesn't always end in ruin. Maybe sometimes, just sometimes, love bends, breaks, bleeds, but still finds its way home. So I ask you one last time, friend, if you had to choose between honor and love, between the life they told you to live and the one your soul begged you to follow, would you be brave enough to lose everything? Because beneath the painted sky, where the wind writes names in the dust and time moves slower than regret, that's where I found the only truth that ever mattered. Love, real love, is never gone. It just waits for the right heart to return.